if I was starting an MSP today, I'm not sure I would start an MSP. I'd build a business process oriented IT consultancy that engages customers on an ongoing contractual basis.
You're listening to the MSP Security Playbook, the show where modern MSPs come to sharpen their strategy, streamline operations, and secure their growth. I'm your host, Jacob Hazelbaker, BDR at Heimdall Security, where we help MSPs win with unified, AI-powered cybersecurity solutions. Today's guest is someone who has seen the MSP industry from every angle. Dave Sobel has been an MSP owner, a vendor leader, and now the voice behind The Business of Tech, one of the most influential podcasts in the channel. His mission? To cut through the noise and give MSPs the clarity they need to focus on what really matters. In this conversation, Dave shares how he curates the flood of industry news into the most valuable 10 minutes of an MSP's day, why he believes the future of MSPs lies in productivity and business processes rather than infrastructure alone, and where AI and automation create real opportunity versus empty hype. We also dive into how MSPs can reposition themselves from being seen as a cost center to delivering measurable return on investment, and what lessons they can take from Dave's own journey building a top 100 tech news podcast almost single-handedly. And in the MSP Hot Seat, Dave tackles a tough question from a growing MSP. When resources are tight, should you prioritize tools, talent, or new revenue? It's a conversation packed with insight, perspective, and practical ideas to future-proof your business. But before all that, here is Adam Pilton, Heimdall Security's cybersecurity advisor, with this week's threat brief.
Thanks, Jacob. Imagine this scenario. An email arrives for one of your client's users. It looks legitimate because it was sent from a reputable marketing platform. The user follows a shortened link, a captcha spins up, and they're dropped onto a perfect-looking Microsoft or Google login page. They type their credentials, enter the MFA code, and think nothing of it. Except the whole sign-in was being proxied in real time. The session cookie was copied, and an attacker now has a valid, replayable session into their cloud services. Let me introduce Void Proxy. Void Proxy is a new phishing for hire platform that combines sophisticated staging, evasive hosting, and a real-time proxy that sits between the user and the real login page. It uses compromised legitimate email senders, chains of redirects, edge-hosted scripts to gate visitors, dynamic DNS, and disposable domains to hide its infrastructure, and a lightweight admin panel that handles stolen session tokens to the attacker. When a victim submits credentials, Void Proxy relays the request to the real provider, captures the authentication response, including multi-factor tokens or session cookies, and gives the attacker a working session almost instantly. Here's how an attack plays out in plain English. An attacker sends phishing emails from a trusted marketing or email service, so the message bypasses spam filters. The link goes through several redirects and temporary domains to disguise the final landing page. A captcha checks that the visitor is human, and an edge-hosted script acts as a gatekeeper and page loader. The victim sees a convincing login page and signs in. Void Proxy then completes the authentication with the real provider, captures the session cookie or token, and makes that cookie available to the attacker's control panel. With that cookie, the attacker can access the account without needing the password again, and they can reuse the session to move laterally, send emails, or access data. So why does this matter? Any compromised Microsoft, Google, or single sign-on account can be used for business email compromise, financial fraud, data theft, and pivoting deeper into a client's network. Because Void Proxy hides behind legitimate services and rotates disposable infrastructure, it's tough to trace and slow to take down. Crucially, many common multi-factor methods, text codes, and authenticator app one-time passwords can be intercepted during the live sign-in, so traditional MFA alone is not always enough to stop the attack. Here's my advice on defending against Void Proxy. Start by enforcing phishing-resistant authentication for all high-risk and administrative users, hardware security keys or platform passkeys. These stop session relay attacks dead in their tracks because there's no reusable secret for the proxy to steal. Layer in risk-based authentication. This will flag unusual activity, new device, different country, high velocity between locations, or an unrecognized browser. Use device posture checks, so only managed, healthy devices can access sensitive apps. If a sign-in fails those checks, require a phishing-resistant second factor before allowing access. And of course, train users to report odd emails and make reporting one click, but assume training will miss some phishes. Finally, make sure you have an instant response playbook for identity compromise, token revocation, forced reauth, device isolation, and a quick threat hunt. So you can move from detection to containment in minutes, not days. Cybercriminals are getting smarter at hiding behind legitimate services and automation, and Void Proxy shows how quickly phishing can become both scalable and stealthy. Close the window they're exploiting, harden identity, limit exposure, and make your instant playbooks instant, not optional. Stay sharp, stay secure. Catch you in the next threat brief. Back to you, Jacob.
Dave Sobel, welcome to the MSP Security Playbook podcast. Thank you for your time today.
Oh, Jacob, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Oh, yeah, I am too. And I love your show. I've been watching your YouTube videos. Your content's really engaging, creative, and I especially love some ones I'm going to ask you about later. I'm super excited for this episode. Something I hadn't thought about was the very start of your career. You experienced the .com crash. And
I've got the grades to show for it.
Oh. Yeah, I wasn't in tech quite then. I was still doing school and all that good stuff. But what was that like? If I could just ask you, like, that was painful, it sounds like, but you came out on top in the end.
I mean, super exciting until it wasn't, right? I mean, like it's because I mean, it's funny because you start seeing the cycle. The longer you've been at this a little bit, you see the cycle. The more and more you do it, like things get excited and there's hype, and then people overextend, and there gets to a lot of point where the big thing that I learned in the .com piece was hey, this better make money. Like that really for me was the lesson. There was a lot of really good ideas during that time that were too soon. The thing I always like, people always pick on the pets.com. If you remember, there was the sock puppet that still lives to this day, right? And everyone talked about, pets.com, and everything became a .com. Well, today we call that Chewy, right? That's an actual business now that is real and makes a lot of money. It just was way too early based on the infrastructure and the capabilities of the internet during that time. That doesn't mean the idea was bad. It was timing. And a lot of what I learned during that piece was like, hey, it's not just the good idea. It's timing, it's finances, it's a little bit of luck. Like it's all of that. So it was super exciting. And then we ran into reality real fast.
That's a great point. Yeah, the timing of it all, because I feel like we've also, as you alluded to, seen other bubbles and other things that came and went. The housing crisis, for example.
Yep, another one. But you look at what's interesting. You bring it up. You dig into like some of the stuff what happened during the housing crisis. Companies that launched during that time are some of the most resilient in there. Because when you launch during a moment of instability, when there's problems there, those businesses tend to be much more hardened to the real world and motivate, like versus ones that launched during a bubble when everything is great, money is flowing. They're more susceptible to errors over the course. So I always look at it very much in that cyclical nature, and that is the joy of experience. And what I hope can continue to be useful for the MSP community is provide some of that perspective.
That's a really good way to look at it. I almost reminds me of resilience coming from pain and suffering and trials. And I think that's really good for business because one time I got hit by a car, broke a bunch of bones, and then other things in life happen. You're like, oh, that's this paper cut. Doesn't really,
Right. And and again, learning to understand the severity of the impacts of the time is a key skill.
Since you've seen all these different phases of different cycles and you've worked in these different roles, I'm super curious because it seems MSPs often are undoubtedly overwhelmed with all the news and information they got to keep up with to get the timing right, to see what's coming up, what's on the horizon. So with so much news for MSPs and so many vendors out there, there's a lot of us, and constant pressure, how do you decide as an MSP what really matters for them, what they should pay attention to?
Follow the money, right? Like it's all about the money. The money's in the customer. So ultimately, you have to spend a lot of time understanding the customer and the customer state of play. And I think it's really important to lean your perspective. If you think of, we talk about being the IT channel and the channel. Well, if you think about that as the channel, the customer is the most important thing. Not what's going on in your back office, not what's going on in your delivery, the customer. What are their pain points? What problems are they facing? What needs do they have? And how can we make their business better? And so there's a lot of things. I mean, I talk a lot on the show about like the job market, the current economy, the buying habits of both consumers and businesses. Because I think, particularly for most of us that serve small businesses, they feel a lot like consumers sometimes because they've got the buying habits of small business. If you're only 10 people, you're really close to a consumer. You feel a lot more like a consumer than so I think those trends are super important. So we understand the challenges that they have, and then we lean into figuring out ways that we can solve their problems. So when you think about the lens, like the lens I always put onto this is, hey, how does what we're talking about impact our customers and what can we do about it?
And to that end, something I love about your work is you alluded to earlier, and when we last spoke, we talked about your process with AI and automation. I really, really love that little world, and there's just so many exciting possibilities there for MSPs. So I'm really curious. You shared, and I watched your YouTube video on it. Super great, by the way. Recommend it for our listeners.
Thank
On your
you.
AI and automation in your own workflow, MSPs and AI, it's a big buzzword, but I'm really curious if you were running an MSP today, how would you approach AI, you personally, and automation, both internally for efficiency and externally for servicing your customers as an MSP?
Yeah, I mean and you actually hit on both of the key words there, automation and AI. AI is the buzzword, right? That's the marketing language. Anyone who's been doing this for a little while will remember cloud too, right? When we were all talking cloud. But it meant everything and thus it meant nothing. And AI has kind of reached some of that level right now. The value I think is in automation. And I talk a lot about the show, and if I were if I was starting an MSP today, I'm not sure I would start an MSP. I'd build a business process oriented IT consultancy that engages customers on an ongoing contractual basis. That's the MRR kind of piece, where we're engaging customers to help build out their business process layer. I think the use of technology to help them run their business better is where the actual unlock is. Right now, a lot of that can be done with really cool automation. Part of that is probably AI powered, and I'm putting that in quotes to mean different things, right? But if we think about generative AI, there's a lot of elements that we can plug generative AI into automation to create some value there that help people do their jobs better and faster. I think that's the piece that is really valuable right now. And I think there's a lot of really interesting services there. And by the way, a lot of the fundamental stuff that too often I think MSPs are talking about is leads are hangers to that. If you're doing business process, both compliance, cybersecurity, they're both incredibly embedded in business process, but business process makes customers money. That's the bit that I look at and say that makes people money if I'm working in there. I quip all the time that every business owner in the world, if I tell them I can give them $1.25 back for every dollar they spend, that's a money machine. They will spend until they are blue in the face. And I embed the other services into that. I don't lead with those because the business process is really what drives their growth.
That's pretty interesting because I feel in cybersecurity, especially, a lot of times we're seen as an expense, not any opportunity for any kind of profit there.
Well, let me
So,
let me be bold. You are.
sure.
Cybersecurity alone is an expense. I always talk about the pressures that customers and IT services face. So first off, let's acknowledge on the one side, criminals are trying to steal your money. We talk about it in too fluffy language all the time. Threat actors making move nation. Like no, criminals are trying to steal your money. That's this side, right? That's bad. It's more. I'm disgusted by it morally. It's wrong. We shouldn't talk. Like we don't accept that, and we've got a whole bunch of things we as society should do about that. But the on the other side is a lot of cybersecurity vendor community side that also wants your money. They just let. And by the way, and I say that because they don't assume any risk. You can buy a lot of cybersecurity products that assume absolutely no risk and responsibility for anything happening. just period. So if I look at it from the customer perspective, you've got two sides that are putting a lot of pressure on you to take your money, and you get nothing for it. And in the middle is the customer and their IT provider, an MSP, that are thinking about the right way to do that. Now, by the way, over on the cybersecurity side, I want to say I think there are a lot of defenders that are doing this for all the right reasons. They are in the business of repelling criminals. They want to do the right thing, but it's about responsibility is where this matters. Where like I look, you have to lean into shared responsibility models, and where that actually puts the providers in bed with you. Are they liable when something happens? Are they going to be part of the response team and potentially be on the hook? Beyond necessarily just warranty guarantees, where are they part of that? That's where cyber insurance fits into that too. There are other financial plans to it, but you have to think about it from the business perspective. Again, when we think about MSPs, we think about IT service providers, they're in the business of helping customers make or protect their money, right?
That's
And
true.
so you have to think about that balance.
Yeah, I love that kind of summary there. And it's very true because often, yeah, cyber does feel it is an expense and it's more of a risk mitigation kind of thing. You said protect what they have. And that's fascinating then because if you were to work on an MSP, it sounds like you would not only do the traditional protecting what they have, but also helping them grow their own business through these new tools, AI and automation and stuff. I loved your YouTube videos. I watched both of the ones we were talking about earlier. And something that really caught my attention was you mentioned as you help MSP clients build their business value, you basically increase their automation, but you don't get rid of the human element. That really stuck with me because you didn't talk about replacing staff, replacing people fully with AI. Instead, you enable them with AI. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that for MSPs, how that you see that working in the future.
Well, I mean, let's get back to a core value all the time. Like every MSP in the world likes to say, like, well, it's all about our people. We're a relationship business. Okay, so do that, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of where it comes down to is I mean, I believe fundamentally business is about people doing things with people, right, and creating new stuff. Now, there is 100% automation in a lot of what we do, like what can be done, and the floor continually rises on the kinds of things that we expect. I mean, again, I've been doing this long enough to remember when there were certain when connecting accessories was hard, right? Like printers were really a thing, right? I remember when that was hard, but it's not anymore because the bar has risen on that level. And by the way, the level of technical acumen of the average user is significantly higher than it used to be. I'm going to say, well, it's a bit of a smile, Jacob. You're a little newer in your career than I am, right? I know that's literally just based on the number of gray hairs that we both got in here. The technical acumen that like Gen Z brings into the workforce is significantly higher than comparable generations at that portion in the career. So we should build on top of that level of experience. But we have to remember that it's all about humans doing human stuff. And that is ultimately where a lot of this comes. Remember, the end customer is a person. Right. So we can't lose sight of that. What we do is we wrap the relationships and enable them with technology to do better things. I fundamentally believe in the idea of automation, but I think the idea of it is to make people better, to do better stuff with their time, better things with their energies, their creativity, the things that they can create, and we build on that. And so I think when I think about the use of automation, I like to think about it through that lens because I find it's the most successful and the most long term. Most of us are building small to mid-sized organizations that need to be sustainable for a significant period of time. I know there's a lot of discussion about like, investors and VC money and like all that kind of stuff. And it's all just large numbers that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. That is not most of us. Most of us run businesses that at the end of the day have got to generate revenue, manage our costs, and create profit. That's just every single day. So let's not lose sight of that.
That's a great way to phrase it. And so now you got me super curious. If you were to start an MSP, you mentioned that you wouldn't only do the traditional MSP things of protecting what they have, but implementing ways to improve their own business processes. So to that point, I was really curious, what would be some of the kind of questions you would recommend that MSPs ask their clients in order to help them discover ways to improve their own businesses of their clients?
It's kind of simple. Tell me about your business. And then just keep asking, hey, why? Hey, why? Tell me more. Hey, and you laugh. It's actually almost so simple. People like talking about themselves. And in particular, if you think about your customers, they're incredibly proud of the businesses they've built. They want to tell you all about it. And if you just simply ask questions, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more, learn and dig into what, tell me about the pain point, tell me about the market, tell me about your customers, who's buying, what's selling, what's not selling, why? Why is that not selling? What did you learn from that? And you just keep asking simple questions. Often, I mean, we can look to our colleagues in journalism actually for this. They ask very simple questions oftentimes. It's a lot of why, how, when, what. Like it's you just want to understand their story. And the more you understand your story, then you can identify, hey, I think I see the pains in their business. I can understand that. And then your job becomes matching them to technology solutions. It's like, hey, I'm aware of technology solutions that can do that. Or by the way, you may not be. And so you work with partners to help you find that, be the distribution partners that help you match the solutions. You go look around vendors to search for it. You become the shopper, but you end up saying like, I just need to understand their problems first and do a really good job of understanding the problem. And then I can think about ways to apply technology to solve those problems.
Something I think you do really well after all of this different set of experiences is you've built a really strong online audience, a really strong presence. You've helped a lot of people stay up to date on news. And also, I think a lot of people trust you because you mentioned in one of your videos that you have two different uh, workspaces in Notion AI. One is kind of your initial gathering information, the other is your production space, and it helps you to stay objective. So people really trust you for that and other reasons. So I was curious, um, for MSPs, what would be some advice you would give to them if they wanted to start to build their own online audience and their own credibility as a trusted advisor?
Well, it's kind of you to say. Thank you for that. It's being intentional about that. Understanding your audience and understanding their concerns. I lean in heavily into transparency. So, for example, I've got an ethics. I mean, I literally have an ethics statement on my website. These are the way that I operate. These are the principles that I do, and then I just apply them when I need to make a decision. And back to a little bit of who am I serving? Right. So I'm serving the MSP audience, and I have a real eye to, hey, what is they and their customers' pain points, and how can I help them there? And being fixated on that. I think ultimately the real way to convey that out to your customers is to just be focused on helping their pain point. Being open, being transparent, like talk out your reasoning. People talk about bias all the time, and I think about bias on a regular basis. It's okay to be biased. We're all biased. Everyone has biases. The trick is being transparent around them. These are the things that I'm motivated by. These are the things I'm not motivated by. These are the things that I think are important. These are the things I don't think important. Like laying that out and being consistent over time is how you build that level of trust. And being really careful about not ever like compromising those sets of rules in order, for any kind of quick gain. If you always have the idea of like, I am in this for the long term. And the more you build that kind of approach, the more reliable the business itself and your voice will become. So if you're thinking about it, you asked, how would I do that for voices to their customers, is just lean into, hey, we're in this for the long term. I am really consistent about the way that I do. These are my guiding principles, and be really transparent on that, and then deliver that way on a consistent basis.
That's a great way to put it. And now I'm looking long term. What's ahead for you in the business of tech? Anything exciting, particularly on the horizon that MSPs, your customers, your viewers should watch out for?
Well, I'm responding. I try and respond a lot to listener feedback, and some of the things that I'm working on right now are some additional strategy guides to ways of interpreting the market, some additional deep dives into what MSPs are doing, and in fact, I post everything that I'm working on my website at businessstuff.tech. There's a bunch of new stuff rolling out, so that we're going to be actually able to provide MSPs with a lot more resources besides just the daily show and the interview stuff, but to give them resources to go a little bit deeper. You can appreciate that I've been doing this now 6 years. It'll be 6 years in October of this year. I've got an extensive database of knowledge and stories and tracking, and we're trying to find ways of taking that market intelligence and deliver it in really new ways. So that it's about giving a better perspective on what's going on in the market.
Because I think you mentioned earlier in your video that you kept track of every news story article you ever read, and that's in your Notion database there. So that is a great source.
Right, exactly. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that I can look at over time. I report on the show like, hey, this is what's going on. But now I'm able to look at things like trends over time. I'm able to talk about reporting, and I combine that with sentiment analysis of what the MSP community is talking about, because I've been tracking that for a very long time, so that I can actually get a sense of like, hey, let's combine what's going on with the news with what the MSPs are talking about, to combine that to some level of market perspective, to project out where they're going based on the decisions, like that kind of intelligence. Look for some of that kind of stuff coming through what I'm working on.
Oh, I definitely will. I'm excited to see what you make there. And now we have arrived at one of my favorite portions of this podcast. We call it the MSP Hot Seat. In this portion, an MSP asks our guest a question. So today we have a question for you from an MSP. They say, Dave, I run a growing MSP, and I'm constantly torn between investing in tools, hiring talent, or finding ways to drive more revenue. If you were in my shoes, how would you prioritize your next dollar of investment?
It's a great question. Okay, so let's break down a little bit of the way that I look at the business, right? So the quick analysis here is MSPs spend roughly 5 to 7% of their in total P&L on tools. They spend roughly 50% of their P&L on people, and 100% of their P&L is dominated by revenue, right? So I quickly look at their stack and say, I actually think tools are the least important thing that an MSP works with, because particularly when I go like, hey, if you're voting with your dollar, it is the smallest line item you're dealing with. In fact, people is a really critical element of what you deal with. When they've asked, my next second question that I always look at is, hey, I'm now broken out your P&L. Let's talk about how well the machine works. Ultimately, my gut says is, hey, I want you to invest in growing top line revenue, but I also want to check that the first thing that you do, if I drop an extra bit of power into the machine that is your profit and loss statement, and it is broken, it will not create more profit at the bottom. So I need to make sure your machine is ready for that growth before we spend money on additional growth. So that's my one hedge base. But I always look and say, look, you're always focused on top line revenue and growing that. You're additionally then analyzing, do the people that are your next expense line item, is it working the way you need? Do you need to invest more of that? And then last is tools, because that is a smaller portion of the machine that drives your business. Think about it like, again, as I said, if I always think about it like a machine, if I drive more through it and there's a lot of leakage at my labor layer, that's much more important than leakage at my tools layer, just based on priorities, right? But if I'm leaking top line revenue, most important problem of all, right? And so if you think about it in terms of priorities that way, always tying it back to your profit and loss piece, the answers do tend to naturally fall out.
Wow. Dave Sobel, thank you so much for your time today. I learned a lot. I love your perspective, especially across your diverse set of experiences throughout your career. And so I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, Jacobs, thanks so much for having me. There's been great, fun questions, and I look forward to further conversations.
What a fascinating conversation today with Dave Sobel. I love his diverse experience, both as an MSP owner, then on the vendor side, and now on content creation side. Super, super fascinating career journey. He made some really good points and bits of advice that I found particularly helpful for MSPs. One thing that really stuck with me in particular was I was talking with him about what he thinks the future of MSPs might be like. And he described it less as the traditional, oh, let's protect what our clients have kind of approach. Let's try to mitigate our clients' risk and call it a day. Instead, he said, in addition to that, he recommended also finding ways to improve the profits, the revenue of your clients through some of the new tools, the AI tools, through automation, finding ways to help your clients, the businesses you're helping, not only protect what they have, but grow their own business, grow their own companies, become more profitable. And I think that's a really good approach, because not only then are you simply a traditional kind of cost mitigation approach style of MSP, but you're also now actually growing your business. So I think that's extremely accurate as to what the future of successful MSPs might look like. The other part I thought was really fascinating was we talked a lot about the impact of AI, of automation throughout MSPs and businesses. And he described a lot in which didn't really replace people with AI, but instead enabled people to be more productive, to do other things better using AI, using tools. So it's really good approach, I think, and especially for MSPs, because you're working with people directly, and people often buy from people they trust. So building that credibility is extremely important. So you don't want to take people out of the loop entirely. You don't want to automate away the human element. You want to still have that there. You want to still have a real person interacting with your clients, your customers as an MSP. You want them to know that someone, actually a real person, is listening and helping them out. So I think that's extremely important. And also making your customers aware of your own limitations, your own biases. Just building that trust is so important. And using AI tools not as a replacement for people, but as a people, if you will, ability multiplier. I think that's a great way to look at it. So I really enjoyed today's conversation with Dave Sobel, and I hope you have found some of his great advice really useful as well. So thank you for listening to the MSP Security Playbook. That's a wrap on this episode of MSP Security Playbook. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. If you found today's insights helpful, be sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. It helps other MSPs find the playbook and level up their security game. Got a question you want us to tackle in the MSP Hot Seat, or a topic you'd like to hear more about? Drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay sharp, stay secure, and keep building the future of your MSP business.